I'm legitimately sitting here wondering if we've even seen the best of Dante Moore yet.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Individual standouts are arriving on today's show. Why? Because I said so, and I just can't wait until tomorrow's show in order to do it. Plus, that one question that we all want to know the answer to about Penn State. That question is getting more interesting. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Dante Moore is better sooner than I expected. I thought we might see this version of Dante Moore in third season this year. The way Oregon's buys are set up is they basically have three different seasons. They have their first 5 games. We're 2 into that, and then it ends with Penn State. Then you've got a bye. Then you play a couple of different games, and then you've got a bye, and then you've got the November stretch where you go at Iowa, you play USC, and you play Washington. Minnesota might be in there too. Not looking that far ahead right now, but I thought what we're seeing right now in games 1 and 2 is what we would see at the end of the year. Once he's had a chance to settle in, build chemistry with his receivers in actual games. The seamless way that all of this works makes me wonder, is there another gear right now? I've always known in the back of my mind, and I talked about this all offseason, hey, this guy in 2026, he comes back, Heisman Trophy favorite, he can live up to that billing. The arm talent somehow, now that we're seeing it consistently in game action, looks better than I thought it would. Which is not to say I had low expectations. I remember watching him at UCLA, but it's looking beyond good coming out of his hand, and he's making all sorts of throws. He's doing the little things well. Like leading guys on screen passes perfectly so they don't have to break stride, in addition to showcasing the whole repertoire. So last week going into the game, what I said about Dante Moore was I liked what I saw in week 1 because he kept it simple. He didn't force the issue. He stepped out of bounds to take points on a field goal situation. I liked a lot of what we saw, basically all of what we saw from him in week 1. He made good reads. He looked poised. He looked confident. But there were no downfield shots. Now, Oregon didn't need to take downfield shots because when you can throw it out to Kenyon Sadiq and he turns a 5-yard hitch into a 20-yard touchdown, what in the world are you going to chuck a 50-50 ball up in the air for every other play? So I said going into Oklahoma State, well, you're going up against what should be at least a somewhat more talented roster. Maybe not. Or maybe Oregon just played that much better. And I was wondering, hey, are the downfield shots going to be, are the deep balls? And then we saw them get unleashed. And he has the big touchdown to Dakorien Moore, and he has the big touchdown to Malik Benson. And he's putting that ball right on the money. Now, the thing I wonder about, as I mentioned in today's show about the next gear, Dante Moore is yet to complete 20 passes in a game. He's yet to attempt 25 passes in the game. Because Oregon so far is running for 280 yards per game on the ground. Now, that is not going to last throughout the course of the year. It would be awesome if it did. I don't think Oregon is going to average, what would it be, 64 points per game throughout the course of this 2025 season. It'd be fun. It'd be cool. I remember not long before the season started, I got a question about whether Oregon would hit the 50-point threshold this year because they didn't do it last year, and it was the first time since like 2020 or 19 or so that they hadn't done that. And they've hit 50 or more points in each of the first 2 games. Might be bound to do it again against Northwestern this week. We'll just have to wait and see. But Dante Moore has gone 16 of 21 for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns in this most recent game. And against Montana State, 18 of 23 for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns. So pretty close to a perfect start, seeing as he's completing 77.3% of his passes, which is just a touch below Bo Nix's single-season NCAA completion percentage record. And he's yet to throw an interception. One is going to show up here eventually, and he's throwing for 3 touchdowns a game. But what happens if Oregon gets into a game? And let's take Iowa as an example. Or I could see Minnesota doing this. Heck, Indiana's defense is underrated. I could see this happening. Or Penn State. There are any number of examples. But what happens with Dante Moore? And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts and your confidence level in Oregon's quarterback right now, because it's hard to not feel really good about what he's doing. He looks like the guy that you envisioned in your head when he first committed to Oregon back in 2023. That's the guy that we've seen through the first 2 weeks. But what happens when you go up against a front where the offensive line can't just dominate, where Noah Whittington's not breaking a 50-plus yard touchdown, on the 3rd carry of the game? Or you're not able to average 6 yards a carry, and you have to kind of lean on your quarterback a bit. Take Ohio State last year at Autzen Stadium as an example. Oregon ran the ball well enough in that game. But were they dominant? Did they have a lot of chunk plays on the ground? No. They had a couple solid ones. They were good enough. But Dillon Gabriel had to go and slice and dice from the pocket in that game. What happens when Dante Moore has to throw the ball 30 times a game? Does he suddenly get much less efficient? Or is he able to maintain a certain level of consistency to where he can go for 330 and 3 touchdowns? It's really hard to not pick option number 2 of those hypothetical scenarios I just laid out. Everything that Dante Moore has done through the first 2 games, you couldn't really have asked for more. Like, no pun intended, you're looking at, individual moments that you could nitpick, criticize, work to improve. And I'm sure he's looking at that on film. The coaching staff's going through it. That's how everybody operates. You strive for perfection even though it can't actually be attained. It's like golf, which is like a lot of things. It keeps you getting better. That's how I think about broadcasting, is how I think about golf. You strive to be perfect even though in the back of your mind you can't get there, but you get closer to it and you'll just keep getting better. But Oregon last week, against a power 4 opponent, busted out the explosive plays. 5 plays of 50 or more yards, and Dante Moore completed 6 passes of 25 yards or more. That might have included the Luke Moga completion, Jeremiah McLaughlin, who looks awesome, by the way. But the chunk plays were right there. I remember talking on this very show, answering a question from one of you out there. Well, what about Will Stein, and do they push the ball down the field enough? Not as if he doesn't want to. Not as if he doesn't have the personnel to do it. And you can't look at Dante Moore and the comfort level that he has and not think to yourself, as much as we all loved Dillon Gabriel last year, as much of a gamer as he was, and how good he was at quarterback and was a Heisman Trophy finalist and whatnot, hard to not look at Dante Moore and see what I talked about all offseason and what many of you have seen as well, which is, Dante has a higher ceiling as a passer. Yeah, he does. He really, really does. He looks like an NFL quarterback out there, quite frankly. It's just 2 games. We can't draw sweeping conclusions until Penn State. Oregon does. Here's the fun thing, and I'll talk about this game later as well. Oregon doesn't have to beat Penn State to raise my expectations for the team's postseason aspirations this year. But so far, boy, hard to have asked for a lot more. But I want to know your thoughts on Oregon's quarterback through 2 games, because I love what I've seen. I bet you've loved what you have seen as well. Drop them in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. All of that good stuff. I can't wait till Tuesday. I'm just too excited. Individual standouts, guys that are going to fly under the radar a little bit. Not Dante Moore, not Dakorien Moore. Those are the obvious ones. I want the sicko names who need their credit. First, this episode brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Do you need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. You want to talk about a game-changing feature for you and your business? Next-day delivery is just that. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, a dedicated support line, Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. If you want a real better ticketing service, Game Time is the way to go. If you want to go to an Oregon game this year, whether that's this week against Northwestern, next week against Oregon State, the following week against Penn State, Game Time is the place to go because they're making it less of a hassle for you to actually get tickets. I know, I've used them before. They're the app, Game Time is, that gives the advantage back to fans. The easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. Plus, you can check out their zone deals. So you pick a section, and then Game Time goes through and picks the seats for you so that you get the best deal, and boom, you save big. They've got all sorts of features that are trying to make the process better for you, the consumer. So go check them out. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Always got to have the second segment sips. Okay. So I touched on this on my reaction show yesterday, and this week's reaction show will be much more timely because it's just the way the schedule works out. I can't get enough of watching Oregon play like a real cohesive team where every guy understands their job but looks like they're doing it not for themselves, for personal glory, but because they buy into the importance of what that means for the broader picture of Oregon football. So my first individual standout is not just one guy from this past week's game, but a collection of individuals. And there are a number of different plays you can point to. The downfield blocking on this team, I'm not saying it was bad last year. Anybody else notice the massive uptick in pancake blocks that are made 10, 15, and 20 yards down the field on the end-around touchdown to Dante Hill, who looks awesome, by the way, as a true freshman? He's got Kenyon Sadiq just flattening a guy out on the wing. Not on the wing, on the wide side of the field. I'm not playing basketball here. Come on, Spencer, get it together. Then you have two linemen, including Alex Harkey, who are all the way down basically to the end zone. Like, if they'd run that play and blocked it just like that at their own 5 yard, they could have run it at their own 1 yard line. I'm pretty sure Dante Hill would have had a touchdown. So this is becoming a real theme for how Oregon is creating explosive running plays, which is something I talked about a lot coming into this season. I wanted to see Oregon be a better running team statistically. I know they have a lot of RPOs. They're probably not going to be back to the level they were by the end of the season that they were at with Kenny Dillingham in 2022, and that's fine as long as the productivity is there. But the lack of explosive running plays was kind of a problem for the offense last year. And then in the big games against Ohio State in particular, you didn't have the number of chunk running plays that helped keep the defense off balance. And so it's a really good sign that Oregon has several different running backs they feel good about, number one. And number two, that we're seeing the lanes get opened up. And we'll see how they fare against stiffer competition that we probably won't be able to judge, really well until Penn State. Oregon's back in the 28-ish point favorite range, according to our friends at FanDuel, as a favorite over Northwestern. This time it's on the road. Yeah, it's just hard. I mean, it's hard for Vegas to not set a huge line when Northwestern lost by 20 to Tulane and Oregon's beating the doors off of everybody at the moment. So that's where I wanted to start. Every person, whether it's Jeremiah McLaughlin, Dakorien Moore, Kenyon Sadiq, Jamari Johnson looks healthy and is awesome as a blocker. Those moments should not be overlooked because I think they are really, really important to springing Oregon's backs free and allowing guys like Dante Hill or Dakorien Moore on a reverse. Like on Dakorien Moore's rushing touchdown was a really fun play to watch because you realize, oh, yeah, that's right. That guy's a 5-star true freshman, number one wide receiver, and he's living up to the hype in real time. He comes around the edge, and Johnson and Sadiq are just sweeping guys away. They have no shot. No shot with those two coming at them. Studs. So, another guy I wanted to give a shout out to. Dillon Thieneman had maybe my favorite incomplete pass of the last 4 years. Maybe. I don't know. The safety play for Oregon has been the biggest positional weakness since Dan Lanning showed up. I don't know that there's even a close second when you consider the number of guys that have played at corner. Gonzo's gone to the NFL. At linebacker, Bosses in the NFL. D-line, loaded. Offensive line, loaded. Just keep going down the list. And then you look at safety and you go, kind of had some guys who were okay, did some nice things, and then you had some outright liabilities out there. Well, Dillon Thieneman, on a ball that got looped in the air, ranged over, looking like John Boyette, and broke up the pass. He also was pretty active in a number of other areas defensively. He just kind of had a nose for a football on Saturday. But man, it feels really good to watch an Oregon defense have that sort of playmaker over the top. They just haven't been able to find that sort of guy. They really haven't. And with Thieneman, at least for a year, they've got one. I hope they get 2 out of him because he, to me, looks as advertised. Oregon has not had, through 2 games, knock on wood, a coverage bust over the top. Got to credit safeties when you don't have one of those. And I think Thieneman is just exactly what Oregon was looking for when they brought him over from Purdue. Like, hey, we've got a need here. And, now they've recruited the position really well, bringing in 5-star guys like Trey McDuffie. By the way, I think Aaron Flowers looks like a good football player too. And I like Kingston Lopa. But having a veteran to kind of hold down the fort, so to speak, in that position room, I think is really good. Speaking of defensive backs, by the way, have you guys noticed that Dalen Austin's a playmaker out there? He and Jaden Kennedy, I think, are rotating at the nickel spot. And Dalen Austin had at least 1 pass breakup in this game, might have had 2. And I think he, is a guy, we know that there's the off-field situation, but if he's allowed to play, he's allowed to play. I'm just going to talk about the football here. And the football from Dalen Austin has looked really, really good. He doesn't have a lot of snaps, and I'll read you something kind of funny from PFF in a moment. But he and Sione Laulea both, and I shouted out Sione last week, but wanted to get on Austin this week. Those 2 guys have been playing a fair amount so far this year in the secondary, and boy, I think they have looked good. Austin's got a coverage grade of 78.9, overall 77.5. The funny thing about Oregon's secondary is there's only one guy that actually qualifies for the snap minimum at this point for what PFF typically grades as, comparing the best players in college football, which speaks to what, the defensive staff have been doing, which is, we're going to play a lot of different guys, and maybe they're still trying to figure out how to condense the rotations, or maybe all these guys are going to play. Because at the cornerback spot alone, which includes the nickel position, you have got Sione Laulea, 42 snaps, Dalen Austin, 33, Jaden Kennedy, 50, Ifeoma Degwu, 56, Jalil Florence, 19, Dakota Fields, 29, Zach Grisham, 28, Brandon Finney, 46, and Naeem Offord, 50. So it has been really, really spread out amongst those guys. But, Austin had, I thought, a couple of really nice moments defensively over the weekend on Saturday. So wanted to give him a shout out there as well. And, there are other guys that I thought about including here, but those were kind of the biggest ones really that stood out. But I will always want to hear from you guys. So individual standouts that you think deserve a shout out here on the show, drop them below and I'll get them into Tuesday's rundown. So then I got a question about one particular individual. One of you asked about Isaiah World, Oregon starting left tackle, and whether he looks like he's, living up to the billing essentially. So according to Pro Football Focus, the answer to is he living up to the hype is no. Have you noticed any major problems with Oregon's offensive line? Also no. Now, what PFF says to this point through 2 games is he's got a 77.8 pass blocking grade, which is very good. That's above average. And a 60.9 run blocking grade. That is well below average. So all that says to me, he's been around college football for the last couple of years. Might just need to get a little bit more time into the offense. I don't think that he's a guy who, is lacking strength or needs to get in the weight room. Josh Connerly, his sophomore year, was a starter and was good, but did need to get stronger. And I think even going into the NFL, he still had that knock against him a little bit, like, needs to get a little bit stronger so he can be better in the run blocking spots, but he's dominant as a pass blocker. Yeah, I don't have a question or a doubt or an issue with Isaiah World. I think that so far, I'm hard-pressed to say a bad word about any of the offensive linemen, man, because Oregon's going for 280 a game on the ground. Dante Moore isn't getting touched. Yeah, what more could you want? He's playing second most important position, arguably, after center. Poncho, stud. The guards look awesome. Alex Harkey, I do feel like has made more impact plays at tackle than Isaiah World. No doubt. And I wouldn't have thought that coming into the year. But that's definitely been the case. And you know what? I feel good about those guys. Oregon's had great tackles the last 2 years. That seems to be continuing right now. Alik Terry, really good coach. Really, really good coach. So, that question, those on YouTube, you can see what the question's going to be. Those on audio, you're just going to have to stick around and find out when it comes to Penn State. I'm just realizing on YouTube, I only actually look at myself on YouTube so much because I'm usually looking in the camera or I'm looking at notes while I'm talking. I just realized how red and tired my eyes look. So Southern Utah played at San Diego. Thrilling game. Unfortunately, the Thunderbirds lost. It was a 6 o'clock Pacific time kickoff, and we bussed back to Cedar City, which is over 7 hours of drive time after the game. And I'm recording this show at 11 o'clock or so, and I just looked into the screen and realized how red my eyes look. Yeah, I need a long night of sleep. Last night was a pretty short one. And then I called a soccer game Saturday afternoon. So, busy guy. And I did 2 shows for you today. Got you the reaction show on Sunday, as always. And then you're getting the show today. So, anyway, thanks for putting up with my stream of consciousness. Anyway, here we go. This is not the last time I'm going to have this question pop up. And you know what? I get it. I really get it. This is an evolving situation. One of my Locked On Ducks insiders out there says, Spencer scale of agreement. Both Penn State and Oregon have very winnable games leading up to the big matchup. I believe this benefits Oregon more than Penn State as we have more depth and younger, less inexperienced players. This means our players gain confidence leading up to the game, while Penn State players may get overconfident or sluggish. What say you? Well, gotta be honest, when I made my notes, I thought that that was a different question. I'm still going to address the game day aspect, but is it ever a good thing to have... Ignorance can be bliss. That can absolutely be true. Gain confidence. Well, hard to argue with Oregon's players are gaining confidence and experience right now. They still can't be as experienced as Penn State's guys. That's literally impossible because of how long they've been playing college football. So we'll have more depth. I don't know if Penn State's too deep well enough. I know their top-end talent is really, really good, by the way. It is as good as Oregon's in just about every spot. There are some differences, but eventually I'll talk about that again with Seiko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Overconfident or sluggish, I don't think that Penn State's lacking for motivation. So while I see where your head's at, this is a 3. I don't think that Penn State's in the mindset of we're just trying to get through the season, just get us to the playoff. They have a lot to prove over there in Happy Valley. Speaking of which, the last time I was asked this question, which I now realize I'm asking myself, but hey, I'm the executive producer of the show, so this can work. The last time I was asked about college game day, going to Oregon at Penn State on September 27th, my answer was, boy, it's going to be really compelling. Both teams should be unbeaten. I don't see how Oregon's not unbeaten by then. Penn State has an even easier schedule than Oregon. They have 3 easy games, then a bye. Oregon's got Northwestern this week. They're favored by 28. They'll be favored by probably 20 plus against Oregon State next week as well, and should be able to take care of business even in a rivalry game. So the obstacle to game day going to Happy Valley has always been that is the same week as Alabama at Georgia. Now, game day this week is going to Knoxville for Georgia at Tennessee. ESPN, for all of their faults, has always done a good job of trying not to cover the same team twice in a year. Now, that did happen to Oregon in 2023. Game day was Oregon at Utah and Oregon at Washington. So it's not impossible that they could double down on Bama at Georgia. But remember, Alabama lost to Florida State. And if you're just looking at the rankings right now, Oregon at Penn State is number 4 at number 2, whereas Alabama at Georgia is 19 against 6. Both are going to be high-level football games and can be really exciting with fantastic environments. Keep an eye on what happens in the next couple of weeks. If Bama stumbles again, or if Georgia were to lose to Tennessee this week, that would all but lock in. Bama plays Wisconsin this weekend at home. They should be fine. If Georgia were to lose at Tennessee this week, that game loses a lot of its luster. I bet it would be Oregon at Penn State. On paper, right now, it should be Oregon at Penn State. Other games to just keep an eye on, LSU at Ole Miss is that week. Auburn at Texas A&M is that week. And I know the SEC and ESPN have got a very close, cozy relationship. We're all aware of that. But man, I tell you, they're looking for the game of the week. Penn State's a phenomenal environment, awesome fans. It is a lot more likely now than it was 2.5 weeks ago, before Florida State upset Alabama, that Oregon Penn State could be game day. So I'd be here for it, man. I would be here for it. The celebrity, I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now. Hopefully I'm gonna save that for later. Okay. Go Ducks 777 sends in this one, which is a hot take. I think all 3 of Mekhi Hughes, Kenyon Sadiq, and Dakorien Moore will have 1,000-yard seasons. No, this question or SSA was not sent in 2 months ago. This was sent in within the last week. So Mekhi Hughes is the number 5 running back, maybe 4 at best, but looks like he is further down the depth chart than a lot of us anticipated. 1,000 yards for a tight end almost never happens, even for a guy like Kenyon Sadiq. Dakorien Moore, on the other hand, he would actually have to up his yardage pretty considerably because, he's, of course, made impact plays, but receiving-wise, he has 95 yards. This receiving room is looking just like I thought it would. Benson, Moore, McLaughlin, Bryant. Justice Lowe's not as involved as I perhaps thought. But those guys all have at least 75 receiving yards through 2 games. None of them have 100 yet. So Dakorien Moore is 4 yards behind Malik Benson for the current team lead in receiving yards. He was my pick to be Oregon's leading receiver at the end of the year. So all 3 of them getting 1,000 yards? Yeah, 1.5. 1.5. That is a hot take that I do not foresee happening. It'd be cool. Be really fun. Not seeing how that one would play out. All right, fun question to end today's show. Spencer, got a question for you. Who are your top 5 all-time Ducks, not only based on performance on the field, but overall person, not limited to football? So when I was thinking about this, I had to go with guys who I've watched play. So Joey Harrington is not on this list. I don't remember watching him play. Do I respect and admire Joey Harrington's career and what he means to the university? Of course. Of course. But you're asking, my favorite all-time Ducks? I bet you guys can't guess. You know what? I'm going to save this for tomorrow, and I'm going to let you guys guess. Little reverse trivia of sorts here that I just came up with as I'm doing this segment. See if you guys get, some of you everydayers out there should be able to get my top two. My top two are very, very gettable. I'll give you a hint, they're both football. I go football, football, basketball, basketball, football. See if you can guess who my top 5 favorite Ducks of all time are. My diehard everydayers should be able to get number 1. I have said it a non-zero number of times on this very program. That's going to be fun. Can't wait. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.